Welcome to episode 76 of Kontrarian Korner. I'm Ben Kellerin. Today we have a very special return guest on to talk with us about the Fed, inflation, the state of the market, all the different distortions that are going on, and all these different topics that we see in day-to-day life as far as cost of living. And maybe I'll poke them on some of the generational divide topics I think are going to be interesting to watch. But I think it'll be a great conversation. So, Rudy, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me. This is our third time. So, good. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely figured it was time to get you back on the podcast. I figured I could wind you up and start you off talking about inflation, but
Sure.
I think it's one of those things where a lot of the day-to-day focus from financial market participants is on like short-term 3 to 6 month type outlook. And one of the things that I think your Twitter posts and kind of commentary helps look at is the long-term kind of grinding effect of inflation. So I wanted to open it up and maybe we can get into what the Fed's doing, like talking about cooling inflation, some of these different things that people seem to be focusing on as far as the short term.
Well, smarter people than me have mentioned that, with unemployment near historic lows and the CPI still 50% above their made-up target, although I don't like to do percentages, but it's 3% the other day, for example. Their target is their made-up target, which they just pulled out of the air, is 2%, and they've been above that since early 2021. So, but in a few more months, it'll be 5 years above that 2% target. Their actual legal mandate is 0%. So stable prices. So that bugs me. And then, you see the headlines yesterday or the day before about cooling inflation. It came in at 3%, I guess, instead of 3.1. I don't know what the deal was, but that's not cooling. Go to a supermarket and tell people that inflation is cooling. They'll tear your head off, And of course, none of these guys ever go to a supermarket. I mean, I don't think, when was the last time Besant was shopping? Guys like that. I've said many times, I've noticed that billionaires don't really seem to care about the cost of living. Or 100, guys that have, 9-figure net worths like Besant. So it's a problem. I posted a chart yesterday, like I like to do, to take off most of the FinTwit people, which instead of posting the inflation rate, year over year. And again, this is using their model. This isn't real cost of living, which I think is much higher, and normal people think is much higher. Anyway, the chart of the official core CPI. Core CPI, this is where they strip out energy and food, which of course none of us use. It's like a straight, lower left to upper right. You'd love to own this stock. Everyone should be trying to buy the CPI because it's a guaranteed to go up. And it almost never goes down. And when it does, it's just for a brief time before they turn on the printing presses to infinity. So that bugged me. People gave me a hard time. I got a few people yelling at me about posting that chart. Oh, it's a chart crime. I go, no, it's a chart of the CPI index. It's not me. It's the BLS that posts that. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, this is the chart he's talking about for any of our audio listeners, but it is basically lower left to top right as far as the actual CPI. So.
And that's a semi-log chart. So it's, ask your parents what a semi-log chart is. And it not you, but, in general, I get a lot of, a lot of times someone will be yelling at me about, well, I think we need 3% inflation. And I'll say, are you an econ major? And, sometimes they just shut up. Other times, it's in their bio or something. I just like to laugh. I go tell your econ professor that you told me off, I block, not block, muting a lot. Thank God for the mute button that Jack gave us some years ago. It's probably the best thing he ever did. Get a lot of people now, because like, for example, if you, well, I shouldn't even say this because this will result in more. I quoted Dave Collum the other day, and Dave made a sort of a comment suggesting that it was interesting that Bitcoin had gone from, uber libertarian to, controlled by Larry Fink in 15 years, and oh my God. So, suddenly I've got hundreds of people replying to me. 95% of them don't follow me. So they don't know that they think I'm not anti-Bitcoin. I have a lot of common ground with the Bitcoin people, believe me. It's just, but if you post anything where you aren't 1000% bullish, you get a lot of hate and a lot of, people telling you to edge, you're an idiot, and which is fine. I'm used to that. So, but I muted a lot of people yesterday, And the ones who are just overtly, you mother, I'll just block them. It's their loss. They won't get to see the funny pictures and stuff.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of intelligent conversation happening on Twitter in some of these spaces, and
it's full of so much junk now. Yeah, more so than in the past, I think. Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, well, it is interesting because like you wonder if these people don't have anything better to do with their lives versus like just basically rage posting at someone who doesn't agree with every little thing on Bitcoin or gold or whatever. And maybe we can detour into Bitcoin a little bit because that's one that I think is pretty interesting because it kind of ties into what's going on with stable coins, what's going on with the treasury market, because like there's people that have talked about like what Bitcoin can be, and I think that argument has started to fade as you see more and more adoption from the BlackRocks and other Wall Street types, where it is kind of turning into something where like people talk about futures manipulation with gold prices and silver prices, but when you see Bitcoin ETFs and Bitcoin futures and all these other things, like I kind of think it's where that's started to head as well.
Well, I mean, not talking about Bitcoin specifically, but crypto in general. I mean, just look with this administration, how much insider trading obviously is going on in some of these cryptos that, there's some announcement and then somebody buys before and then they go to the moon. A lot of this grifting is coming from the top. As for Bitcoin, listen, I've told people before, I should be a billionaire. I could have bought Bitcoin, cheap years ago. I made the mistake of thinking that the government would crush it. I mean, we've gone to war before over any threats to, U.S. dollar. Look at Saddam, look at Gaddafi. But I think now maybe under this administration, they've co-opted it. They figure out we'll figure out a way to use crypto, use the stable coins to try and pump up treasuries or something. I don't know. I mean, I don't even try. There's smarter guys than me that are figuring this out. So, Bitcoin, I missed out on that, and I own a little. And if it goes to billions, I'll have $1 billion or something. But I mean, what'll $1 billion buy you? I like to joke that someday everybody will be a billionaire. I think what I get a lot of grief, like I'm talking about from yesterday, and I don't mind. Could go ahead and call me names. I mean, I said I'm impervious to that, and I'll just mute you. So, is I think these guys are, they're making money and they're happy. And they don't, I think a lot of guys don't put a lot of thought into it. And then if you challenge it's like saying, NVIDIA is overpriced and you own NVIDIA. I've had, people get mad at you over that. It's like telling them one of their kids are ugly, but they don't tend to like I made a comment yesterday. If I post something, that NVIDIA is too expensive or something, I might get a couple guys, say, hey, no, it's not, it's got this growth. And I go, okay, yeah, sure. And then, but with Bitcoin, it's almost like a cult. And I ran into this 15 years ago or 12 years ago with there was some guys called Free Gold, and they were like gold fanatics in the same sense that we have the Bitcoin fanatics now. And I'm friends with a lot of Bitcoin maxis or almost maxis. I mean, not that they're maxis, but guys like Marty Bent and Larry Lepard are great guys, and they've been wonderful people to me, and I've chatted with them all the time, and they're huge Bitcoin guys, and they don't, if they see me post something, that isn't 100% positive Bitcoin, they don't come screaming at me, because they kind of know that, that you need to have a little doubt. I mean, I own a big chunk of some companies, and am I convinced at 100% that they're never going to go bankrupt? No, I mean, I'm not. I mean, I can't be 100% convinced. I think I'm 98%. But anyone who thinks they're absolutely positive on almost anything is that's kind of like you got to kind of maybe think that maybe something could go wrong that you don't foresee. But in general on FinTwit, I made this comment. I mean, I was talking about this 8-9 years ago. Is there's a lot of people out there that are like, yeah, I know there's corruption, I know there's fraud, and I know it's just, it's a bubble, but I don't care. I'm making money. I know people are, hungry, and I know half the country is hand to mouth, but I don't care. I'm making money. I screw the grandkids, basically, is what, in a nutshell, what it is. And, if you're 22, you don't care about grandkids anyway, but there's a lot of people my age that are like, stock market better go up. They don't care if CPI. Well, they do. I mean, but the most important thing to some people, and it's only about 10% of the population that are in stocks, really, because half the population owns none. And your average 401k, account for most people is negligible. And it's really the top, 10% of the population that I think owns 90% of the stock, something like that. And it's heavily skewed to like the top 1% or the top 0.01% that have, the vast majority of stocks. So really it's the stock market is really benefiting the most well-off people in the country. And that's the Cantillon effect, which I talk about a lot. The money, when they print money, it goes to the people with first access to the money. It goes to the stock market. It goes to crypto. It goes to, other Bitcoin. Bitcoin's what, 114,000 a day. It's done very well. Seems to be a beneficiary of liquidity. Now they're talking about cutting rates when we have, inflation that's just, I think, out of control, if you ask most people. And they're going to cut rates, and maybe inflation goes down to 2.5 or 2, but we've already had so much damage to your average people who have to, I see guys like Barry Sternlicht on CNBC, and they say things like, a 4% inflation target would be fine. I mean, that's an exact quote, and the guy's worth like $5 billion. So of course, if you're worth $5 billion, if you're Bill Ackman or you're Barry Sternlicht, you don't care whether the inflation rate is 3 or 5 or 7. You just want your real estate to go up and your hedge funds to go up. But I come from middle class background, and that's who I battle for, and the poor people too, that are getting just destroyed by inflation. And if you put on CNBC, you would think there's no problem at all with the cost of living. But I've been telling people for a long time, even when they had the CPI at like 1%, it's a huge problem for people because the CPI does not measure the cost of living. Okay,
Yeah,
rent over.
That's for sure. I mean, I kind of notice it when I'm like, I buy the same like handful of things at the grocery store, basically every couple of weeks or whatever it is, and it's not that I can afford it, I get it, but it's when you see the prices go from where they were in 2020, 2021, and it's like 6 months later they get bumped, and 6 months later they get bumped again. Like, I remember being able to buy, I think, the Costco pack of ground beef for like $8 or $9 in 2020, 2021, and now it's like 25, 26, somewhere in there. And it's just kind of the same thing you see across all these different things, whether it's eggs or, I mean, go down the list, right? But I think
there's those guys that post like, they buy a basket of goods from like Walmart and they have it on their phone over the record, right, of what they bought like, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And then, so they actually show apples to apples, and it's 100% increase. It's way higher than the CPI. And that's how CPI, I think, should be calculated, as a basket of goods or a group of basket of goods, depending on different scenarios. But they don't do that. People think that the CPI is like, the price of the price of your beef one year was $8 and the next year it was 16. That's 100% increase, right? But no. They'll monkey with that. That's not how the CPI works. For 25 years, new car prices didn't go up. Okay, so it's because they say, the car went up, but it's a better car, so the price actually went down.
Yeah, it's That's how they keep all the economists employed, is figuring out new ways to monkey with the CPI.
Yeah, I think the Fed has 25,000, maybe even 30,000 employees. Although I hear there might be cutting some now, which,
Yeah,
so what?
We'll see if the government shutdown has anything to do with that. But my guess
is they're self-funding. They can print money and buy bonds.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a good gig,
Yeah, no, it's I think it will be interesting to see. This may be another detour that's worth going into, but the whole government shutdown thing, I kind of assumed it'd be wrapping up right around now, but I haven't really paid that close of attention to it. But it is funny to see all these different accounts talking about EBT and SNAP benefits and all this other stuff. And it's right. The fact that we subsidize a bunch of these different things, it's not surprising that we've ended up where we are when you've got who knows how many millions of people that are here that are basically being funded by our government. So, do you have any thoughts on the shutdown and all this other stuff?
Yeah. I don't know. The maximum for one person household in the lower 48 was 292 a month. I'm looking at food stamps. I looked at it years ago. A 4-person household could receive up to 975. Wow, that is a lot of money. But it's 12,000 a year. I think I was going to look up what's the total cost to the country of the food stamp program. I mean, it's in the billions. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. I remember about 100 billion for 2024. Which is a lot, used to be a lot of money, 100 billion, but that's not, I mean, that's not where I want to focus my wrath. You know what I mean? I mean, there are people, I used to work at a liquor store years ago, and when people would come in and they'd buy, milk with food stamps, and then they'd buy, beer and cigarettes with cash. So, that bugged me. I mean, I'm like 16 working there, and, I'm paying taxes, and it bugged the checker. But I think there are a lot of people that really need it. And unfortunately, there's always people that are going to abuse things and stuff. As far as this being a high priority for me to attack, I mean, because I think there are a significant number of people who actually are very poor and need. I mean, otherwise, we don't want to be Calcutta, although some parts of our country look like it. So I just don't think it's in a perfect world, would we go through and we'd eliminate all the fraud and only give the assistance to, single family moms with 3 kids or something that I would, it's not a high priority for me. I don't think that's why we're 37 trillion in debt. You know what I mean? Look how much we squirted on the billionaires or the trillionaires or billionaires in 2020 or even in 2008. So to me, I'd rather attack that first. Let's stop bailing out failed billionaires. A lot of our policies, I've said over the years, have been to keep solely to keep billionaires from becoming centimillionaires. And I think we need to stop that. We need to end too big to fail. We need to end too big to jail. I said before, if I'm dictator, those are the first 2 things I'm saying. You can fail, and then everybody, of course, if you're Jamie Dimon or you're Rick Reeder. Or Larry Fink, you'll say, well, you can't let them fail or the system will implode. Well, listen, we've proven that money is no object. So we could let, let's say Citigroup fails again, which it's failed a number of times. Let's say it fails again. Wipe out the shareholders, wipe out the executives, do clawbacks. And, are there ramifications? We need to, you need a 10 billion here, 5 billion there. Go ahead. I mean, that's my point. Is we've proven we have the money. They'll print the money to save the system, but whose system is it? I don't think there's anybody who's a taxpayer-backed bank CEO who should be a billionaire. Ben Hunt's great on that. He says, these guys are generationally wealthy from running a company that's where the government guarantees you're never going to fail. I mean, sign me up. I mean, is Jamie Dimon a good manager? Yeah, but you know what? He's got at least 5 felony counts under his watch there at the bank, for which no individual had any ramifications. And he was also Epstein's banker for 15 years, and they knew exactly what was going on. They knew exactly, and they apparently the money was worth more to them than stopping child trafficking. So, and they weren't the only bank.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting too when I've been going down a rabbit hole recently with money laundering and how the banks basically participate with a lot of the drug money, trafficking money, and that is a big part of what's keeping the system afloat. And they take their VIG or whatever you want to call it for basically cleaning the money, but it's I think it's really big in European banks too, and City of London, all that. But it is really interesting to see where all this stuff is kind of got us as far as the banking system and as far as holding people accountable. Because if you go back to 2008 and actually punish people and really were stringing up bankers basically after all that fiasco, I don't think you get Trump. I don't think you get
100%.
The totally wealth divide that we have now. I don't think you get the younger generations looking around pissed off about what's happened to the country. I don't think you get all these different things.
Totally agree. This is one of the first things I was mentioning back in 2013 is that You would, and well, later on, I mentioned you would not have Trump today if we had backstopped the non-billionaires and yet let them fail. Let the bankers fail and put a few of them in jail. But unfortunately, we got Barack Obama and Eric Holder, and Eric Holder was a bank lawyer, who actually came up with a too big to jail theory, which I've posted him talking about it. And then when he left the Obama administration after they were done doing their damage, he went back to the same bank that he'd worked, or same law firm he'd worked at before, where he was defending banks. So that Obama was they had a chance in when he came in to correct the excesses of the horrific Bush administration, and they failed. He became the banksters' best friend, and I think that was probably their intention from the beginning. But Obama talked a good game, but his words mean absolutely nothing.
Well, didn't Citi pick like his entire cabinet?
Yes. And then Trump comes in 20 what was his first election, 2016, and he puts his change was to put Goldman Sachs in charge instead of Citi. So that was quite the revolution there.
Yeah, so. It is funny to go back and look at some of the stuff and see how things have developed over the last 10, 15 years. Because, right, this wasn't stuff I was paying attention to in high school or college. But now, like, looking back on it, it's amazing to see how things have changed and how other things have stayed the same. But that
for you as a young guy to recognize that the way we handled 2008 led to Trump. I think that's a great insight, because a lot of, it's mostly, like Dimitri Kofinas and I, we totally think that, but it's rare to hear someone, your age that, probably wasn't in the thick of it in 2008, so yeah, absolutely. And then what we did in 2020 was 2008 on steroids.
Yeah.
And I even predicted it in 2018. I said the next time the banks are, next time there's a crisis, what they're going to do is they're going to give trillions and trillions of dollars to the same guys they bailed out in 08. But they're going to give the serfs like, here's $1,000, here's $2,000. And that's exactly what they did. Yeah. And so, everyone's like, I got money. I can, order DoorDash now every night. But believe me, the guys, for every $1,000 somebody got $100 billion. I was posting at the time, they had all those TALF programs, they had all those Fed programs, loans. There were Cayman Island corporations set up in 2020, March 2020 or something, that were getting these loans at like 0.75% for $100 million. I was posting it. I mean, it's something that should have been in the New York Times, but I guess they don't care about, I was even asking, who are some of these, LLCs? Who is this guy, George so-and-so, that's just got a loan from the Fed for, $100 million at 0.75% interest? And yet there was never, to my knowledge, any real investigation of any of that. It was basically a gift to the top 1%, most of their programs. And the reason that there weren't riots in the streets is because, they're sending Joe Sixpack $1,000, or $600 or whatever it was. So yeah, it's criminal and it's bipartisan. I mean, I tell people, I got yelled at today because I said something about Trump, and they said, "What about Clinton?" And I'm like, "Gee, man, I have 1,000 posts on Clinton. What are you talking about?" Everybody assumes that you're either Team Red or Team Blue, and I'm Team America. You know what I mean? And so I don't care what letter is after your name if you're corrupt, and there's a lot of corruption in the D's and the R's. Financial and the sex stuff, it's 100% bipartisan, and people that are just locked into that one party, whether it's the D or the R, you are in a dead end. And you should realize this is all what they call in wrestling, kayfabe. It's all a big joke. There's one party. I think I said years ago, there's two parties. There's like the pro-war, pro-bankster, party, and then there's the wackos, and then which would be people like me that look at my pinned tweet. That's what I care about the most on Twitter. But anyway, it's very good observation of yours, I think, about Bush and Obama and leading to Trump, 100%.
Well, I think too, this is goes back to like the Republicans versus Democrats, right, left, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The like team mentality, I think is very much starting to shift. And I've seen this from conversations I've had with younger men, especially, where it's like anyone under 30 or 35. Like there was a headline that I saw on Twitter yesterday, and it says Gen Z males are turning away from Donald Trump, but are not aligning with the Democratic Party either, expressing frustration with both sides.
Good.
I'm like, that's short version to say Donald Trump is like way too far to the left is like what most of the guys are thinking. And I think when you kind of see all like some of the conversations I've had with people and you see where that heads over the next 5 or 10 years, like I think it is going to be one of the most important political changes that is coming is how right wing young men are on average here in the U.S.
Yeah. Well, then you got the guy in New York, Mandami or whatever, and
Who
somebody
shouldn't
had
even be here, but go ahead.
no, but somebody had a great post, and that I retweeted, a food for thought, and it's here. Let me look it up real quick, because I thought it was very powerful in what he said.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I'll share my screen here too because this reminds me of I was listening to another podcast, and they basically said, yeah, this chart right here is how you get Mamdani.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. This is the guy. It's from a guy named Jay Boultard. So I already like his name, Bullard.
Yep.
I'll say this about Mamdani. He's a microcosm of an issue that's going to sweep across America if we keep dedicating 100% of our focus to making stocks and real estates go up every day without fighting inflation for normal people. He's just the first of many to come. And I reposted that with the words "food for thought" because what's my big thing over the years, bashing the Fed and talking about inflation and how it affects most Americans, and it's been completely ignored by everybody. If you remember in 2020, the FOMC, Powell, all of them, every one of them, and I have quotes, I post their quotes, they were calling for higher inflation. We need more inflation. We want more inflation. We'll be happy if we get high inflation. And then they got high inflation. But probably largely also because of all the money that they squirted out in 2020. But and yet there's never has Powell ever stood up and said the Federal Reserve is largely responsible for the burst of inflation, or has anyone said well, I guess they have said blame Congress, but really the Fed is Congress's drug dealer. So I posted a good Kevin Warsh quote today on my site that. It was the Fed that got into politics. It was the Fed that told the Congress, hey, we're going to put rates zero and we're going to buy all your bonds. And so what's the message to Congress? Spend as much as you want, get into as much debt as you can. And they did. So
yeah,
there you go.
No, it is funny to see people's reactions to kind of some of these different political developments, because I think that's where it really does depend on what narrative or what narrative bubble you're in. And it depends on your kind of outlook on where the country's headed, because I'm like more and more convinced that there's like the system is not going to fix itself. You can't voting is not going to fix a lot of the problems the U.S. faces. And where that leads is like definitely up for debate. But when you see guys like Mamdani and should he be in the country at all? Should he be allowed to run for office? Probably not. But are more people with his politics going to continue to appear in the U.S. if we kind of keep going down this road? I think so.
Yes. You'll have more extremes on the left and right. I said, 10 years ago, why do I bash the Fed? I go, because they are driving people to extremism with their wealth inequality policies. And that's now it's coming true. So you're saying kids your age or guys your age they think Trump's too liberal.
He is too liberal, but yeah.
See, the thing I would just say is you got to be careful in general of getting too far into ideology. I think Munger has a great quote on that, because that can be a dead end too, just like the tribalism of the left and of the DNR. When I was, I always try to listen, and I follow people that I mostly don't agree with, or that I maybe disagree with half the time, because I think it's good to I think people should be open to and not insecure about hearing. If you're a huge Trump supporter and you think he's the greatest president ever, why would an anti-Trump? I mean, I can understand, and superficially, you'd be bugged that somebody doesn't appreciate how great he is. But why would you? What do you care if somebody disagrees on that? It's like anything. That's why I say some of these Bitcoin guys that come at me, I said, why are you so insecure? You have the greatest investment in the history of the world. So what do you care if someone's not 1,000% bullish? There's a lot of insecurity out there, I think. And I think insecure people can be dangerous, in all sorts of ways. Yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of people don't think voting is solving anything. And because I think we have a uniparty, I think that's correct. And it's a very well entrenched uniparty. And George Washington warned against political parties years ago. I mean, he also warned against foreign influence, which we clearly are under as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if everybody wants to take one thing out of this conversation, please go look up and read George Washington's farewell address, which I think was written by Jefferson and Madison largely, but it is outstanding. He talks about foreign policy extensively in there. And basically, he's the original he's the real America first. George Washington. This is a guy who could have been king and turned it down. So read that. Also, Eisenhower's farewell address too is excellent. You can find both of those on the internet quite easily. There's video actually of Eisenhower's, which is worth watching. It's about 15 minutes long. But I couldn't find any video of George Washington's farewell address, so you'll have to just read that one. But anyway, yeah, it's we start off with George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Look who we got now. We got Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump. I mean, what a fall! What a pathetic fall.
Yeah.
So we need some new leaders, and we need inclusive leaders. We need a leader that will bring left and right together, at least to the extent that he doesn't go out of his way to demonize other Americans, which I hate. Guys like Gavin Newsom do it, and Trump does it, and Biden did it. We need someone who is a president for all Americans. Trump goes out of his way just to attack people who disagree with him, and that I think that's a dead end. Let's try and find common ground. We're all Americans. Some have wacky views. Gee, how did they get wacky views? Well, maybe somebody said, well, why are young people more into socialism? And I posted years ago, I said, maybe they got the idea that capitalism was bailing out Lloyd Blankfein while they were evicted. Maybe they thought that was capitalism. There was nothing capitalist about what happened in 2008 or 2020. I mean, there's nothing capitalist about a Federal Reserve. What we have, and I've said, for years, is we have, socialism for the rich and Darwinian capitalism for everybody else, largely. We privatize profits and we socialize losses in this country, and that ticks people off. They notice it after a while, and then what you get is more extremism, which I've been combating for years. But I'm just one guy. I'm not one of these influencer accounts that has 2 million followers that cheerleads everything Trump or Biden does, or whoever the Democratic version is, So I just do what I can, and I think I made a small difference, and I'll keep fighting. I've been doing this forever, been long before Twitter, and I care about the future, and I care more about my kids than I do about myself, and I think a lot of the boomers don't, and that bugs me. And anyway, just as I'm just going on my usual contrarian rant here, and it says Kontrarian Korner, so it's okay.
Yep. Yeah, I'll allow it.
Yeah. You can edit this all out.
But one of the things I was thinking about while you're talking there about some of these different things, whether it's Bitcoin and these different asset classes and people getting so fired up about one issue or another, I think it is like kind of in some ways like where you see like the lack of religion or it replacing religion for some things, where it's like, okay, for some in 2020, it was safe and effective, and you got to wear your mask, and that's your sign of obedience. And in other cases, it's Bitcoin fixes this as a religion, and other people have these different issues. But I think it is something where I think at least you're going to see younger generations, especially again led by the men, like you're going to see more of them starting to go to church, more of them starting to be interested in ways that I think are important to potentially fix this. But do you have any thoughts on like how it's not just like separation of church and state, but like the kind of void in the culture left by like a lack of religion has kind of like politics or different things have tried to step in and fill it, and obviously doesn't work that well. What are your kind of thoughts on
I
that
think
topic?
I think you're 100% right. I think there's been a I think intentional campaign really ramped up in the last say 10 years to destroy a nuclear family. And I think that's the destruction of the nuclear family since the 60s is largely caused by the high cost of living too. In part is people don't have kids anymore because they can't afford it, right? I think it's intentional. I mean, the whole trans, dementia that we've gone through is insane. I think religion is assuming your religion is not, Wahhabi or something where you plan on killing other people who don't agree with you. But I think there's a huge hole in America's soul. They try and fill it with whatever drugs or Bitcoin or gold or ephemeral wealth. There's a huge worship, especially among the better off of wealth. Bloomberg has a billionaire index where they keep track of that, minute by minute, I think, of what Jeff Bezos is worth, and people apparently follow that and care. You see it in the celebrity culture, just some despicable people are on the cover of all of our magazines and on the TV. And there's a real hole, and I think people are starting to fill it. I've noticed myself that I see young people at church and a lot of kids, and that's why I don't get too down. I mean, I've been a defender of young people on online because I've mentioned before, we see the goofballs, we see the rioters that are in the guys breaking windows, but you don't see the kids that are going to church. You don't see the kids that are getting up early to go to college, go to school, working hard, playing sports, helping others, working on charity projects or church projects, or people that are young professionals that are doctors and paramedics and firemen and all that. I see all these types of people that are in their 20s and 30s, and they're just wonderful people that'll be great assets, and they're religious, and they're honest, and I don't think they spend much time watching Fox News or MSNBC. I mean, almost nobody in America really does. We grossly overemphasize the importance of these sorts of networks. The best advice I've given people in the last few years is stop watching all cable news, all of it. I don't watch, I may watch the weather. I started that in 2016 after Trump won, and everybody in the media went insane. Russia. And I remember at the time, and I still say it, if you think Trump won because of the Russians, you are delusional. And you're going to lose again. And they almost did in 2020, and they did in 2024. He's back. So it wasn't because of the Russians. I think initially it was because of, like we said, it was because of the Bush and Obama administrations. That's exactly why Trump won, and people hoped he'd be different. But frankly, especially in this current administration, it seems like he's helping the top people. He's not helping Joe Sixpack, I don't think, very much. It is nice, I guess, that you don't have 50,000 immigrants pouring in a week or whatever it was, but that's good. But some of his just wacky stuff, he's going to end the war in Ukraine on day one. He was going to, half his administration said Israel is our top priority. I mean, what is that? Is that MAGA? I don't know.
I don't know. That's just nothing's changed on that front.
No, but it's insane because I think most people are very anti-war. I was a big anti-Soviet, Cold War, right-wing guy back in the 70s, I guess, growing up. And but as I've said before, I think the neocons have done far more damage to the world and to the United States than the Russians could ever do, other than nuke us. The neocons that are still running things, now. And Trump, Trump is a lot like Obama in the sense that he talks a good game, but then when he gets in power, Trump the candidate is not Trump the president. two different guys. I mean, just look at the Epstein thing. Oh my God. But anyway, I can go off on any of these topics if you want, but getting back to your spiritual component, 100% agree. There's a massive hole. And then there's a group of people, I think, on particularly the Biden administration, and to a less maybe and the Obama administration, which I think probably ran the Biden administration, is this emphasis on just destroying morality, class morality in this country. And it's not a good thing. I don't know that it's ended, but it seems you're able to say a lot more now without getting automatically canceled. You're able to speak up and say, you know what? I don't think dudes should be playing in women's sports. I mean, I said it, but a lot of people, I didn't get instant ban, but you could have been. You can't call Caitlyn Jenner Bruce. That was, remember the dead naming that was an insta block. You were instantly suspended on Twitter under Jack, and I kind of like Jack, but he was surrounded by a bunch of Pol Pot wannabes. But now people are speaking their mind more, which is good. And I think people say, oh well, we have to ban hate speech or something. Well, what's hate speech? You define it. What's hate speech? For me, it's anybody that disagrees with me, that's hate speech. You know what I mean? It's a slippery slope. And I think if you have Nazis or you have commies, let them talk. I want to hear it. I want to know that guy's a commie and that guy's a Nazi. I mean, if you balkanize everybody, then they can have these little groups over here and left and right that are plotting revolution and all that. And so I'm almost a free speech maximalist, or absolutist. You can't yell, fire in a crowded theater. Okay, I understand that. But if I want to say I hate, Norwegians, for example, which I don't. I mean, I like them. I don't know many. So, but I mean, that should be okay. And then people can, I said for years, mute and block are very effective. We don't need to ban someone just because you disagree with them. We if you don't like them, don't listen to them. Same thing with a comedian. People that get into uproars because of, Dave Chappelle or, Joe Rogan. Well, then don't listen to them. I mean, there's comedians I don't like. I don't listen to them. So try that.
Yeah, it is one of those things where I think a lot of people would benefit from like the occasional social media detox or some sort of limit on, hey, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I don't go on Twitter at all, or whatever it is, right? Where it's like limiting the amount of time you spend staring at screens. And this kind of goes back to like the void of religion, but you're kind of talking about what you see and why you're optimistic about younger generations and why that one of the things I'll add is you don't see stuff like that, like people working hard or like doing the right things, like all those things end up on social media. Like what you do see is like the guys renting a Lamborghini, like the woman shaking her ass, all that stuff.
Right.
That's what goes viral. And so the attention economy kind of rewards all the wrong behaviors, right? But it kind of is just a systemic thing with social media where I don't think there's a perfect solution to it, but I think it's important for everyone to realize that, hey, this is a tool and not something to be used as nonstop entertainment, because that's a slippery slope. So yeah, it is pretty interesting to see though. But I do want to get into back into markets here a little bit as we start to tail off, because I know this could be pretty good chunk of time, but I want to get into kind of the state of the market, if you're seeing any opportunities out there, and maybe also if you have some thoughts on private equity and private credit, because when I see like, oh, you have X, Y, and Z company trying to offer private credit to retail, and you see, what was it, First Brands, and some of these other things that blow up and they have a whole shitload more debt, and that's the technical term, by the way, on their balance sheet and off balance sheet stuff. I think private credit is basically toxic sludge on average. So what's your kind of thoughts on state of the market, where risks might be hiding or starting to come to the surface, if you see any opportunities?
Well, private credit is so opaque. I've written some stuff on the Tricolor, or I've been reading stuff on that, and on the First Brands, and there's a few others too. I think Jeff Snyder brought up that I was reading anyway, and maybe I haven't posted it yet on my Substack, but There's a great quote in one of the articles on these things. It's something like, "You don't get paid for due diligence in this market," which I just found to just sort of encapsulate the whole thing. They are there's they were so desperate for an extra for reaching for yield has been a problem forever. There's an old quote that says, more money's been lost reaching for yield than at the barrel of a gun. And I think. There's a lot of cockroaches, to quote, is that Jamie Dimon, and in private credit. They don't have to mark to market. I mean, I think even a few years ago, like BREIT, or a couple of years ago, BREIT, said they were up for the year on their commercial real estate, whereas all the public, REITs had their net asset value had dropped 20% or something. So there's a lot of extend and pretend, and of course we did that in 08. And in fact, that's when the bull market started, I think, is when they stopped the mark to market in early 09. We have, I was thinking last night, about earnings, what is, I think the S&P now, as far as valuation, is trading, someone said like 25 times PE, maybe something like that. And if the 10 years at 4%, they're like, well, that's normal. I go, yeah, but I mean, are these the same earnings of 25 years ago? I mean, because they've, you've got so much non-GAAP, and you've got the adjustments. And so I don't really trust the earnings. Private credit is going to be a huge problem, because they're even worse than the public companies, because they are not, there's nobody there. And I mean, there's no regulators on that. There's no regulators at all. Big thing about this administration seems to be to end, most regulation of financial institutions, which I guess helps the donors, but I mean, I don't think it helps the average person. But then again, if you're in these markets, if you're in private, caveat emptor, you kind of, it's like I said the other day about Argentina. If you loan money to Argentina, and why would you expect to get paid back? I mean, have you no sense of history? I think that's the thing. The main thing would be history. Nothing that's going on now is for the first time. It's all been happened before in different ways. I think there's like 3 more zeros after everything now. It's so much bigger than some people compare it to the dot-com bubble, but this is like the dot-com bubble times 1,000, or more, the amounts involved. I think it's going to end badly. Of course, I'm always early. I mean, we could go on another 5 years, and the thing that's always in the back of my mind is, look at a chart of Brazilian stocks, or look at a chart of Weimar Germany stocks. Nominally, they go to the moon. So that's why you can't be short. I mean, unless you're extremely psychotic or extremely brave. But so that's not an option. My option is my short is cash. I always have too much cash. So it's an option on if there ever is a meaningful decline, which there never can be, of course. I guess April was a meaningful decline, but other than that, they come every couple of years. And frankly, that's my investing style too, is I just wait every couple of years for the market to just throw up, and then I'll buy stuff, and then it'll go down after I buy it, and then I'll buy some more, and it'll go down again. But it's a very treacherous time. I mean, I thought, it just keeps getting worse and worse without the flush. I mean, we went down, 30% or 35% in 2020, and then they just opened the spigots. And so that's what everybody thinks now. Everybody thinks, well, like, the market can never go down because the Fed will just come in. And I don't know. I mean, betting on the omnipotence of the Fed is it's one of those things where, don't be 100% sure. You could have a huge dump. It just depends on what's going on with the currency, and with rates. The Fed's got a whole bunch of plates in the air, and I hope the stock market is not their top priority, even though it seems to have been in recent decade or two.
Well, it kind of goes back to what Luke Gromen has said about like the stock market kind of being a matter of national security at this point in our hyper financialized economy.
He's right, but it's just grotesque that we've got that situation, because, like I said,
I don't like it any more than you do, but
no,
I think he's right too.
Yeah, I mean, but again, who's that benefiting? Just the very top edge of society, really is. And then people say, well, but the top 10% pay, by 50% of consumption. Well, isn't that a sick society where we developed that way? You know what I mean? It's like it's all top down. There's no, it's trickle down, or it's the wealth, which conservatives say trickle down and liberals say the wealth effect. It's the same thing. It's the same garbage that they use to justify the candy on effect, which is basically the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and that's what's been happening. And I don't think that's good for society. I mean, I'm sure Jamie Dimon thinks it's a great thing, but although he's a little more thoughtful than most of these finance guys, I shouldn't use him. Bill Ackman say, Bill Ackman cares about Bill Ackman. So
yeah, and Israel, but go on.
And Israel, and I, Israel is Israel. They're, I'm an American. I'm Team America. So, and same thing goes for Ukraine. Same thing goes for Saudi Arabia. I don't care about any of them. We should deal with them and be done with it. Permanent alliances, again, go back to George Washington. No permanent alliances with anybody, because their interests are not ours, and we will get dragged into wars, which we have been in my lifetime, to help other countries, not in the best interest of Americans. So, and the same people are still in charge. So, there's talk of escalating the war with Russia. I mean, think about this. We're giving them long-range missiles to Ukraine to shoot deep into Russia. Okay, what if Russia gave Iran long-range missiles to shoot into Texas? What would, or to shoot into Puerto Rico? I mean, what would we do? That'd be a nuclear war. And as we learned in 20, when the invasion was of Ukraine, and by the way, history didn't start with that invasion. There's a lot of history going back that people ignore or don't care to know. But there's a lot of people came out and said, we could win a nuclear war. I mean, you had Sean Penn talking with Sean Hannity, because I saw the clip, I didn't watch it live, saying, we shouldn't be too afraid to use nuclear weapons. It's like as if there could be a small scale nuclear war, and I think that's a demonic fantasy that we're going to have some sort of limited nuclear war. You're crazy, and I personally don't want to vaporize the entire United States over Ukraine or Israel or Saudi or anybody unless somebody is attacking us.
It'd be good to avoid.
You think that's a controversial opinion, though, Ben, nowadays, for you to say that. Really? It would be good to go, oh, really? So you don't care about who owns Kiev?
No,
and frankly,
I could give a shit about countries halfway around the world and who they're fighting and their neighbors. And
90% of Americans, I would say,
Yeah.
So
anyway, no, it is amazing to kind of think about how focused basically Washington, D.C. and kind of the surrounding areas have become on what is going on the other side of the planet. And it's frustrating to see, because there's a lot of like even just when you look at how much money is going to Israel, Ukraine, and you see some of the stuff going on here in the U.S., it's like, okay, I don't want to print money and use it to try and fix problems, but I'm pretty sure there are better uses, even if it's government directed here at home, than basically shipping that money overseas to never be seen again, or to end up in a Swiss bank account, or whatever it is. Right.
Absolutely.
But it's, I think
but it's funny. That's a completely rational and normal person's opinion that is probably shared by 80 or 90% of the American population, yet completely ignored if you look at who's running the foreign policy in this country. And it's not just under Trump. It was under Biden and under Bush. And I mean, Bush's foreign policy was just atrocious. No one was, the Iraq war alone was just a horrific, sick part of our history. I mean, that war was completely unnecessary, and it was not done for our national security or anything. It's just because, I think it was done to the interest of other countries, and also the Bush administration just lied their way into it. And how many people actually were accountable for that? Like none, right? I mean, Bush now became a liberal hero when he criticized Trump, remember? And how many people were held responsible for Afghanistan? We were there 20 years, and heroin production went through the roof. And then we left.
They shut that down once fentanyl started to become a thing. So,
the Taliban came in and shut it down after we left. Yeah, because
I'm saying they pulled out of or the pullout from Afghanistan was basically within a year or two. The whole fentanyl,
correct, bursting
out of the scene. So.
Yeah, and okay, we're dealing with that now, though. We're sinking fishing boats in Venezuela, so don't worry. The war on drugs is being won any day now. So,
Oh no, some of those are not fishing boats, but
but the thing is, okay, fine, but we have so we're just extrajudicially executing suspects around the world now. Be careful, because everything Trump's doing, and the people who love Trump say, "Yeah, do it." There's going to be, what if you have President Gavin Newsom doing, blowing up people you do like, I mean, this is we have a constitution in this country, and it's a very good constitution, and I think we should try and follow it. We don't declare wars anymore. It's just completely up to the executive. And I complained when it was Bush, and I complained when it was Obama, and I complained when it was Biden, and I complained when it was Trump. And so if people can't deal with that, then fine, just block me. But I mean, what's wrong with following the Constitution? I mean, that's why I loathe the Bush administration so much, is because they totally trashed the Constitution after 9/11 and doing Iraq, and then I mean, it was just ridiculous. And Obama made it worse. And then the next two, it's more of the same. I think we're still under a state of emergency. We have all sorts of constitutional rights that have been just taken away in the last 25 years. And once they're taken away, you never get them back without some sort of, unpleasantness. So anyway, that's another pet peeve. It's in my pinned tweet. Getting back to, do I see any investment opportunities right now? I don't know. I mean, frankly, no. Not for me personally. I'm not a typical investor, though. I mean, I've been managing my own money for 40 years, and I always, since I was a kid, I always had a job. I always had a little bit of money. Was in stock accounts back in the 80s and probably late 70s. I had money market account paying 14%, things like that. But so I don't have a typical portfolio. I have no FOMO. So if you tell me you bought, fart coin at a penny and it went to $10, I'll be like, wow, good for you. I won't be like, damn it, I should buy some fart coin now so that I can go. It goes to 20.
20, yeah.
Yeah. So that helps me. I don't panic. That's the other thing. So like if the market crashed 25% tomorrow, I'd be going, okay, all right, let's see. What do I want to buy? And of course, like I've said before, if I buy it when it's down 25%, it would then fall another 25%, and then I'd probably buy more. So I don't follow, rock solid investment rules. I don't have stops. I don't. I will add to a losing position, which is like heresy, And of course, I'm not a trader. I'm an investor. I have some of my favorite follows are guys that are traders that trade all the time. And of course, rules for trading all the time can be quite different than rules for trading a few times a year, or 10 times a year or whatever.
Yeah.
And so and I have core positions I've had for 30 years, and I have another group of stock, or a pot of money where I trade in and out all the time. And these are all in non taxable retirement accounts, so there's no tax implications. And frankly, I love volatility. And April was great, and what was it? October 22 was fun, and March 2020. I remember March 2020. When maybe it was like February 2020, and the market had already started to go down, and it was down like 14%. I remember, and Steve Leisman gets on the boob tube, the Fed spokeshole. Leisman said, "Stock markets, Fed needs to act now." And I remember posting at the time, "Well, hey Steve, wait, hang on a second." I go, "The stock market's down 14%." Off its all-time highs at the time. I said, isn't that a good thing for young people that are just entering the workforce and starting to buy stocks? Isn't that good for them, lower prices? And of course, he never answers. But and that's kind of the way I look at things. It's like, yeah, there's winners and losers for everything. Any situation, there's a winner and a loser. House prices drop 50%, and I'm underwater in my house and I lost my job and I got to move. Well, okay, that's bad for you, but some young couple that's been saving that wants to start a family can suddenly buy that house. Maybe you're an investor that lost your house and have to sell it, and a young family buys it. To me, that's a good thing. So there's winners and losers and everything. And I think that the Fed and the government, through their policies, has been picking winners for my whole lifetime. And they've been people like Larry Fink and Bill Ackman and Donald Trump and the Bidens, and I don't think enough people recognize that it's these policies are funneling wealth upwards, not down. You can yell at the Snap people, but I'd rather yell at Bill Ackman and and guys like that,
Yeah.
So because I like to punch up, I always do. I don't like to pick on. There's a lot of people. I've done very well, or I'm very happy, and I feel there's a lot of very poor people in this country that are suffering, middle class people that are struggling, and I care. Actually, I kind of care I came from that background, and that's where my sympathies lie. So I'm not going to pick on some guy, make fun of somebody, but I will make fun of Ben Bernanke or Janet Yellen for sure, because I think they've done immeasurable damage to this country, and Powell too. Frankly, I mean, he went insane during COVID. And he's a very callous guy. I think he's made some comments, and at times he'll say the truth, and other times he just lies, and I've called him out a few times, over the years on that. So I don't think he's any better. He's a private equity guy. He was at Carlyle Group, so look up his private equity record. I have a whole series of posts on it. It's not impressive. He doesn't care about little guy. For him, a little guy is someone that, is worth $50 million, and I think that's a lot. And, all the guys on CNBC, who do they hang out with? They don't hang out with anybody that struggles to pay for food or rent. It's as if those people don't exist. And frankly, they don't. I think Donald Trump really cares whether, about some black family in LA that got evicted and rents for $4,000 a month to have a house. He doesn't care about them. They don't donate, and so I just see that, and it makes me angry, because I wish we had a leader that cared about, that really was America first. And I think we don't have one right now. And we didn't have.
We've had one for my entire life.
That's the thing. I'm going to have people screaming at me, "Oh, Trump's the best. Trump's wait, but what about Biden? What about Obama?" I go, fine. They were horrible, and I said they were horrible at the time. In fact, if I had the biggest contempt, it would be for the Bush administration. But Trump is terrible as far as I'm concerned on the vast majority of things, and so was Biden, and so was Obama, and so was Bush. But I think people are kind of shocked when you're nonpartisan, or when you're bipartisan.
When you just hate both sides.
Yeah, and because they're so used to, like, you're either MSNBC or you're Fox, and you can't be not that. You have to be, because otherwise they don't know what to do with you.
They don't know what team you're on. They don't know if they can just automatically assume a bunch of different things about you.
And I have a number of friends that are Trump supporters, very strong Trump supporters, and I have a few friends that are very strong, Biden, Obama supporters, and I can hang out with both of them. Now, those two groups do not like to hang out with each other, but I'm like Switzerland. I have no problem. I could talk to you, and you could tell me that you're joining the Communist Party or something, and I would talk to you like, well, okay, what do you, but I wouldn't like go, oh my God, get out of my house. Because I think we need more dialogue. We need more common ground. And the example I use is, look at Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich. Those guys worked together in Congress for years, and they are very opposite people politically on most issues, but they cared about war, and they cared about the Fed and the financial system, and how the Cantillon effect is pumping wealth upward. And they were both anti-war. And so that's the kind of thing we need. Instead of arguing about the stuff we disagree with, let's get together and work on the stuff we do agree on, So anti-war left and anti-war right should get together. But there's so few of them now. I mean, it seems like Congress maybe there's 5 people against war in Congress now. And of course, none of them ever have to suffer the consequences of it,
Yeah, that's how you get reelected, though. So I do want to ask about a couple different things that I think are starting to get interesting here as far as markets. Gold and silver finally started to pull back a little bit. I know that the gold has actually been kind of the ultimate safe haven in the last 6 months. It's probably a little bit overcooked near term, and due for the pullback we're kind of starting to see. But what are your thoughts on the precious metals, any other commodities, anything else you might be looking at as far as like, hey, this is I think a pretty interesting pond to be fishing in as far as different investment ideas?
Yeah, I have in my trading, the stocks that I trade, like I was in the gold stocks, but I got out, probably around 3,800 or so, 37, 38. So I missed the last blow off part of it here. Gold, somebody posted today, and I haven't checked it, but they said something like gold is trading at 2.7 times production cost. And apparently, according to this article, which I can't remember where I read it, 3.7 was the peak, like maybe back in 1980. And so the guy was writing, if it goes to 3.7, the gold would go to like $5,000. So, I if gold falls back to, goes to 3,000, then it might be interesting. Frankly, I haven't been, I've been buying it since, I've been interested in gold since, it was $200, $300, $400 an ounce. If it drops back down, 1,000, I might buy some GLD or something. And then if it drops another 1,000, maybe buy some more, I never, I do trade the mining stocks, but the actual, metal itself, I think that's just money. That's just permanent. That's like a form of savings. So gold is intriguing. I mean, it's had a nice run. I haven't bought it here. Like I said, I missed the blow off to like 4,300 or something. Silver is also, it's down today to 48 or something. I don't know, or it's coming down.
Somewhere in 46 range.
Yeah. I mean, if it dropped into the 30s, maybe it's interesting again. I mean, I don't know. I mean, gold is something like I just buy it and never sell it. I have gold. I've for a long time. So to me, gold is a handgun you keep in a drawer and hope you never need. It's kind of just like I don't know. It's insurance in a way. It's not a trading vehicle for me. The gold stocks are a different story. You can let me look at GDXJ here for a second. Yeah, same thing. It had a nice pop. I probably missed $30 of that, but it's coming down. It looks kind of overdone. On my limited technical analysis ability here, so I wouldn't be buying it here. If you get a real dump, which you could have in gold and silver, especially in gold and silver stocks, then you might, if you don't own any, you might want to pick some up. I think everybody should have some. Just like everybody should have some cash too, because, if the market drops 25% tomorrow or something, you might want to buy something. And, that's when you make your money, is when you buy. And the biggest deals are when you have forced selling. And that's interesting because, if you start having more of these bankruptcies and private equity and collapses and things like that, maybe you get some forced selling. Frankly, the Fed stepped in 2020 and really prevented a lot of forced selling. I mean, I think Buffett was waiting by his phone and it never rang, because deals he would have got in 2000, he didn't get the call this time because the Fed just squirted money over everybody. And so you don't have creative destruction in that sort of scenario.
Yeah.
But in answer to your question, it just depends. Are you a trader or an investor? A trader can probably buy tomorrow and make a quick trade. But for someone like me, I would need gold or silver or the stocks to go down significantly from here before I'd be interested in trading them, buying them again.
And have you looked at platinum at all?
No, but I know Dave was early on that column.
I was poking him on that a while back, and I'm like, you got to take a look at this. This is a layup over the next 3 to 5 years.
Did you turn him on to platinum? Yeah.
I think one of several people that had been kind of pushing to take a look.
I mean, that's a 50% since what, April? So it's still around 1580 or something like that.
I mean, it's but
still again,
cheap compared to where it's going, though, is the thing.
Well, again, here's the thing that Jason Shapiro, who's a trader I like, mentioned. He goes, and he was like kind of bearish on gold. He's at this level. He's like, yeah, it's he goes, it's rolling over. But he goes, you know what? But if there's 500 million people in China that are buying gold every day, that's going to overwhelm, whatever the commitment of traders is or something. You know what I mean? It's physical.
Yeah.
Now, I always thought they played a lot of games with the paper. I don't think they have nearly the gold for delivery that they have trading in paper. Silver the same.
Oh, no, right? Not even close.
Right. So that's the thing. And I think what we had recently is a shortage of physical gold, like gold in your hand. And they can do whatever they want with paper. I mean, they can probably print, contracts. I mean, there's is that Michael Howell, the liquidity guy. He said he was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange in 1987, and the trader there told him that, hung up the phone and goes, that was the Fed. They were buying futures. And Howell goes, and I posted this, Michael Howell goes, well, they can't do that. That's illegal, right? So if they were doing illegal purchases of stock futures in 1987, is it too tinfoily to say maybe they could be dumping, paper gold, in 2025? I don't know. I can never prove that, of course, but is it possible? Yeah, maybe. I don't think everything's a manipulation in gold and silver. I mean, there's sometimes more sellers than buyers, but I don't know I never trusted the paper market. I once said about GLD, See, I would just use GLD for trading. I said GLD is like having a picture of a gun for self-defense purposes. You know what I mean? Because in a real meltdown, they might just declare force majeure and go, here's your money back or something. I mean, I don't think you're ever going to, I don't trust anything paper really, if it's what do you guys like to, what do the Bitcoin guys like to say? Not your keys, not your Bitcoin,
not your coins.
Yeah. If you're not, yeah. So the same sort of thing goes with a variety of other things, including gold. And then of course there's the great taking guy, I forget his name, but where he says, they're just going to take your stocks in your bank account or in your brokerage account someday, which that's one I'm pretty skeptical on. I'm thinking, that's something that people would really revolt over if they suddenly find out that their shares of NVIDIA have been confiscated by the government or something,
and the wealthy people in power that we've kind of been talking about, they're not interested in a complete collapse like that. Right.
No, especially not of the stock market, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Yeah, I mean that's where their bread is buttered in the stock market largely. I mean that's why I think if you look at insider trading, they've got a site called Open Insider, and you just type in any stock, NVIDIA, whatever, and it's 99% selling. And you've got not just CEOs and CFOs and all that, but you've got I'm sure there's mid-level managers at NVIDIA that have worked there for 5 years that are cashing in $5 or $10 million option grants, right? And so I think that's why you've got a large part in better areas or more expensive areas. There's a huge price appreciation still. Parts of the country house prices are coming down, but from what I see, it's kind of it's flattening out now, or it's turning down now. Because I'm in California, so it's a more expensive area. But I've noticed the battleship is finally turning even here. But I think a lot of that housing money came from stock sales, or options.
Income. Definitely.
And that may go away someday. Now I know that's impossible because the Fed's got our back, but just be aware it could happen. It may not happen, but it could.
Yeah, that is maybe a perfect segue into residential real estate, which I think is another interesting topic, which I'm sure we could go on for another hour about, but
sure.
I figured I would slide it in at the end. But with the way I've heard a lot of smart people kind of both sides where it seems ridiculously overpriced as far as wages and average income. But at the same time, I can understand the argument that there's other constraints on residential real estate. I look at it, I think most markets, especially the ones that are overheated, are probably going to get cheaper, not just because rates aren't high, but rates are higher than they were. But what's your kind of thoughts on residential real estate?
House prices are too high. I mean, everyone likes to talk about the high rates. The rates aren't high. Historically, the rates aren't high, but historically, the price to incomes is very high. So I think in some places, as Melody Wright points out, have already started dropping. Mostly places like, Texas and, North Carolina or Boise or things like that. And where I'm at, a starter house might be over $1 million. You're talking 1,200 square foot type house. It's absurd. Of course, it's a different situation. You got a lot of forward money, and you've got, of course, the stock sales and things like that. But I think when I grew up, it never occurred to us that we wouldn't own a home, because the homes were like 3 times, maybe in my parents' and dad's case, 3 times one income. And then they became like 3 times 2 incomes in the 80s, from my experience. And now where I'm at, they might be 10 or 15 times, medium household income.
Well, and you have to compete with immigration and institutions and investors and
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, people say, I think like 30% of the or higher of the houses now are nationally are investors. And that doesn't mean Blackstone necessarily. It could just be the guy that owns 2 or 3, 4 houses. A lot of people bought Airbnbs. I mean, God, I'd run into people and they're talking about their house. Yeah, I got an Airbnb in Illinois. I got an Airbnb in Texas. And I'm like, what? I couldn't believe even at the time that in 2020, people were buying houses without even visiting them. And it was just insane, And And so there was a lot of that. And if Airbnb bought up a couple million houses, that's 2 million or a million houses that aren't going to a family. When Barry Sternlicht's Starwood buys 200,000 houses somewhere in Phoenix or Atlanta or across the country, that's 200,000 houses that aren't going to be owned, or 20,000 houses or whatever it is that aren't going to be owned by families or by individuals. And then people say, well, the big investors are only like 2 or 3% of the houses. Yeah, but in real estate, prices are set by the marginal buyer. This guy named Nick Calaris who's talking about 08, not 08, 09, probably 10 or 12, 2010, 2012, 13, where he said, Blackstone would come in to these auctions and just buy every single house offered. And they were able to pay, because they get cheap Fed financing. They would very cheap financing. They would be able to pay way more than like the ma and pa investor or the homeowner, the person who wanted to live in the house, could pay. So again, that's picking winner. Our monetary policy picks winners and losers all the time, and that was a case where the Obama administration and Geithner actively encouraged these hedge funds and to come in and buy huge chunks of houses that would have otherwise gone to what we traditionally view as the American dream. A family buying a house. So now you've got more renters. And we went from Bush's ownership society to you'll own nothing and be happy. The WEF plan, and it seems like we've implemented the WEF plan in this country. It's all about renting now, and I don't think people have the same sense of Americanism or patriotism or whatever it is when they're renting about their neighborhood as if they own. And this has a lot of ramifications down the road, and again, it's sort of, people aren't coaching Little League and people aren't mowing the lawn, talking to their neighbors anymore, things like that to the same degree. But I think that house prices are too high. They got to come down. I think they're largely a result of Fed and government policy. Everything the Fed and the government has done in my lifetime has been designed to make houses more expensive than they otherwise would be. There is no municipality or government agency in the United States that wants house prices to be lower. They would rather subsidize. They would rather do anything to keep the prices high, probably largely because of property taxes and things like that. I think, California has Proposition 13, where, you get taxed on the purchase value of your house and then it goes up 2% a year. And there's a lot of people that hate that. But I got to tell you, people in the rest of the country are realizing now why Prop 13 was passed, because, you live in Austin, you bought a house for $100,000, and then here come all the Californians 5 years later, and suddenly it's worth $400,000, and your property taxes, quadruple or, go up, triple. So everyone's realizing that now. Hey, wait a minute, it's an unrealized capital gains tax,
Yeah.
So I'm very rooting for the kids. I have a house, and I'm talking against my book like I do all the time. I hope house prices, I wouldn't mind it. I'm not going anywhere, and I hope if they get cut in half, fine. A lot of people use Zillow as like a stock quote. Oh, my house is up $1,000 this week. It's like, it's a joke. It's a joke. So I never look at it on the way up, and I never look at it on the way down. So I would welcome, hey, unfortunately, the way our government works is if house prices did drop 50%, let's say, which I'm not saying this is going to happen or anything, but what would happen? They would cut rates to zero, and they would pump, trillions into the wealthiest people in this country, and they would come in and buy all the houses. That's the scenario that would be very bad with lower prices, unfortunately. Ideally, though, you think about it, these guys bought a lot of houses. Maybe they can, I figure Blackstone and some of these others have to be, look at like some of these companies like Open Door and stuff that lost money buying houses in the best housing boom in history, and they somehow managed to lose money. Or who else was in it? Zillow was in it for a while, Houses used to be a place to live, and in the last 20 years, they've become a financialized investment, house hacking. It's not good for society. It's good for, the top 10% that have made a lot of money off it. And why did everyone get into housing, initially as an investment? Because the Fed cut rates to zero for 10 years, and they were reaching for yield. And so they go, well, I could rent a house. I can't get a 5% CD anymore, so I'm going I'm going to buy this house at a 6% cap rate or something, or buy this, multifamily. And so that's what largely led to the financialization, I think, is just a desperate reach for yield. And that's also why you have a lot of mom and pop investors too, because they're like, I got no income anymore for 10 years. I got 0%. I got to do something. I guess I'll buy 2 houses in the neighborhood and rent them. 2 houses that would have gone to a homeowner and a family. And so again, it's all down to the destruction of the family, which I think is wants that at the very high level. I'm not sure who, but there's a group of people that want that.
Yeah, I definitely see that pattern as well. I'm hopeful that the other kind of people that are around my age wake up early enough to figure it out, and it's something that we can turn around. Everyone's kind of like, oh, birth rate's never going to go up again and all this other shit. It's like, no, there are solutions to this. It's just most people are not open-minded enough to understand what that would take. So anyway,
I know some young families that have a number of kids, 3, 4, 5 kids. I mean, I think that it just depends. There's if you're a young couple and you're just you just hate the world and you got your 2 dogs and you don't want to have any kids, that's fine. That's one thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, but I think
there is something wrong with that, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are, there's a whole book about it. It'll be like the, there's certain groups that have very high birth rates. There's the Mormons, there's religious, certain Christian religious groups. I think Orthodox Jews, very high. Muslims tend to have high. So somebody said something that the growth of growth of Mormons in the United States could be, in 100 years. You're talking about generations and generations. If you have a group of your average white bread American couple has, 0.9 kids, and then the Mormon family has 3, over 3 or 4 generations, you're going to have a huge population explosion and actually a population decline, in certain groups. I mean, Europe's dying out. And anyways, the whole book's premise was that certain groups with higher reproduction are going to become more and more dominant as you go over 100 years. I mean, you could have you could have a period where, in 100 years, you could have a quite different society than you have now. And depending upon which group is reproducing quicker, it may be better or worse from your point of view. But there are people having kids still. It's good to see. And I see a lot of you talking about church and stuff. I see a lot of people, young families there with kids. I'm not that familiar with, but I know people that are homeschooling and they have kids and their kids are great kids, and then they, so there are people out there, good people starting families against all odds and having kids. And so there's hope. I'm not a black pillar. I'm very positive because I think that it wasn't the kids that screwed up the world. It was the guys in their 70s that are still running our country, many of them in 80s and 60s and 70s, it's people older than me. And I'm glad that they're, at some point they have to keep dying off unless their pact with Satan extends, like I joke about Kissinger, he kept extending his pact and then Satan.
He got a contract extension.
Yeah, he got a contract extension. Yeah. So eventually you guys are going to take over, and what you have to do is prevent the nutcases that you see on social media from being in charge, and just get rid of the mainstream media. It's just such garbage. We need, it's
that'll die organically. You look at the average age, the viewers, and as far as not letting the nut jobs be in charge, I think most of them are pretty much incompetent. If you're looking at the all the types that become a meme on social media, but I think
incompetence hasn't stopped any recent. I mean, the Bush administration was incompetent, but look, they won 2 terms, so
Yeah, that's true. I guess as we're trying to wrap up here, I do have to ask one kind of overarching follow-up question, which is, do you think markets can go back to allocating capital based on fundamentals and what a business is worth, valuations, all these different things, different motivations between debt and equity? Or do you think there's kind of no stopping this train as far as the path we're on, and it's never going to change? What's your view on that?
I mean, unless you put a leash on the Federal Reserve, I mean, the market we have now, it wasn't like this, even 25 years ago. It really was, I guess, '08 when we really went off the rails. I mean, you could date it back to long-term capital or other, but this whole too big to fail, too big to jail, that really, like I said, too big to jail started under Holder, because Bush actually Ken Lay was sentenced to prison. That was Bush's biggest donor, to his credit. So that the too big to fail, too big to jail really started in the last 25 years or so. And can that be ended? Only if you get you get people in Congress who are going to put a leash on the Fed, because if they keep bailing everybody out, and by everybody I mean the top 0.01%, that's all that matters to them. That's who they work for. That's who owns them. You need to get rid of you need to change Congress, and you need to change the Fed. Those are the two sources of the vast majority of the problems this country, and the neocons. You got to get them out. But that's the triumvirate of what's wrong with this country. I think that I'd like to get back to where markets mattered and weren't heavily manipulated, but we've created so many powerful, entrenched financial institutions and hedge funds, and Larry Fink practically is like one of the fifth branch of government right now. Unless we're willing to let these guys fail the next time the market sneeze, Congress is for the Fed's Congress's drug dealer, as I put it, and the Congress likes its drugs. So I don't know. I don't think people. I think they don't care about normal people in this country. They don't care about it doesn't matter. I said if you make $500,000 and you're worth a million, seven figures, you're closer to the homeless guy than you are to David Tepper. They don't care about us. They'll talk about us. I mean, both sides, liberals and Mandami will talk about the little guy, and Trump will talk about the little guy, but neither of them care about. They don't care about the little guy. I mean, they care about their donors, and they care about their ideology. And so anyway, I'm kind of. I would love to see it, but you have to end too big to fail and too big to jail.
Yeah, I think that'll be the day. I think you're right on the time. It's just as far as how many years, generations that might take, we'll have to wait and see. But
well, maybe all your buddies, get all your buddies in Congress in 5-10 years, and maybe you can change things. I don't know.
I don't think it's a federal solution. I think the solutions are going to start at the state level and basically be forced up from there if it's something that can be fixed. So, well,
I'm in California, the People's Communist Republic of California. It's more hopeless here. I mean, we got to get rid of this Newsom guy. In fact, I hope he runs for president so he gets out of the state. I can't imagine that people in Florida would vote for him, or Texas, but
yeah, I think these.
But then you get J.D. Vance. Then you get Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the alternative is you get sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say there's problems on both sides. Like you said, you've got a technocratic deep state puppet on one side, or you've got like leftist shitbag from California on the other.
He's basically he's loaded, and he's your classical. I mean, I could just go off on him during COVID. I mean, he was a total hypocrite and just went out of his way to make life miserable for most people here. He's just a horrible person, Gavin Newsom. And but then I said, okay, so Gavin Newsom runs against J.D. Vance, which you might as well let Peter Thiel run in the country. He's the guy that concerns me. But anyway, it'll
be interesting to see where all that stuff goes. But I do have to ask my traditional closing question, which is, what book should I add to my reading list? Could be history, finance, anything else.
Oh, well, the one I'm reading now actually is nothing to do with that. It's called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, which if you ask, I just started reading it coincidentally, and then Dave Collin mentioned it the other day in a podcast. Yeah, it's called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, and it's about a book by David McGowan, and it's all about how the 60s scene in Laurel Canyon, where a lot of
CIA. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And
I haven't read the book, but I am familiar. Yeah,
it's a fascinating tale, and it's amazing how many of these rock stars came from military families, and the military. They weren't just like privates in the military; they were like high level. working on nuclear programs, working on counterintelligence, working on, there's a lot of weird things going on there. It's a fascinating story. I'll probably follow it up with the book Chaos, which is a similar story about, Manson and the CIA. And, so that's the kind of thing I'm reading when I'm not reading 100-year-old finance books or whatever. But yeah, that's what I'm reading right now. Weird Seeds Inside the Canyon. Have not finished it. I'm probably about 10%, 20% of the way through.
Yeah, sounds interesting. It's lines up with some of the podcasts I've listened to on the topic. There's definitely a lot of cultural influence in the 60s that most people don't realize was kind of agencies behind the scenes and whatnot.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about how much, and of course the CIA was huge into LSD and all that. They brought it to the country. They gave it, Leary, Timothy Leary worked with the CIA. This is all well known now. It's just to actually read it and to see all the connections. It's fascinating. Makes you wonder how deep the mind. They were working on mind control back, in the 40s. So imagine how good they are at it today.
Yeah.
So
no, but they left all those experiments back in the 60s. They don't do anything like that today at all.
Oh,
so.
that's the great Whitney Webb quote. I mean, by the way, everyone should follow Whitney Webb. She's the best investigator around as far as I'm concerned. She has a great quote that says, if you tell people that the CIA did bad things in the 50s, most people will say, oh yeah, that was terrible. But if you tell them the CIA did bad things 3 years ago, they'll look at you and go, what are you, some sort of weird conspiracy theorist? So yeah, it's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah. If the listeners haven't already found their way to your Twitter account or social media, where should they look for you or your work?
Rudy Havenstein on Twitter and for hate mail, and for rudy.substack.com for more longer form, more financial stuff. And so there's a lot of attempted humor thrown in both.
Yeah, it's definitely worth following both places. It's entertaining stuff, and definitely so someone has to basically comment and say some of these things that you've been getting after the Fed and these different people for a long time. So it's,
as I put it, somebody has to do it. I have CNBC on in the background as white noise, and I just hear so much just elitist garbage every day that it kind of inspires me.
Yeah. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that you see on CNBS that is
CNBS,
worth basically shitting all over. But yeah, I really do appreciate taking the time. I think people will enjoy the conversations, the occasional rabbit hole, the rants at some points. But no, it's definitely enjoyed having you on. We'll have to do it again sometime. I've got a second guest that I have in mind that we'll have to see if we can't get a quicker repeat appearance than last time. So
no, I appreciate it. I mean, most people don't have me on more than once, so good for you. Thank you.
No, it's entertaining and definitely makes my job easy when you go off on the long rants. So don't have to jump in and interrupt too much. So
still waiting for Neil Kashkari to debate me. Yeah.
I'll host it if he joins in. So I do appreciate taking the time. I think with that we'll be wrapping up. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.